The Trans Am Bike Race is an annual, self-supported, ultra-distance cycling race across the United States. The route is 4,200 miles long and runs from the Pacific Coast in Astoria, Oregon, to the Atlantic Coast in Yorktown, Virginia. Jon Bell completed that race in just 24 days, 3 hours, and 42 minutes. First off, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I think before we get into the story, let's find out a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, so I moved originally to St. Louis City in 2007. I work at St. Louis University. I'm now the head track and field coach, track and field and cross country coach at St. Louis U. I came here in 2007 as an assistant, kind of worked my way up very, very quickly, and then moved to O'Fallon about 7 years ago. Got married. My wife is a city council member. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up in O'Fallon. And we really, really do like the community. We love it here. It's a great place to have a family, raise a family.
So what made you decide to do this?
That's a good question. Something's not right. No, all seriousness, so there was a documentary about this race that came out, the original race in 14. And I'd seen that video, seen that documentary, and I was like, "There's no way. I'm never going to ride a bike, as part of this race." And then I actually started this race in 2017. Some things changed. I was like, "Yeah, maybe I do want to give it a try." And so I started in 2017. I only made it to Council, Idaho, before I had some tendonitis and I actually had pneumonia as well, some sickness and some injuries. I was like, "Okay, I got to pull the plug." Kind of in that part of the route, you start to go into an area of Idaho where you don't have cell phone coverage or very limited cell phone coverage for about 300 miles. And I was like, if I get into trouble, this is probably a good place to bail before I get in trouble. Fast forward to 2021. Obviously I think everybody struggled in 2020 with COVID and being indoors and, working remotely and just everything that pandemic has brought on. The good thing is, with that from a physical standpoint, I was able to ride a bike a lot because I was working from home. So I did ride more than I've ever, in 2020, ridden more miles than I'd ever ridden before. So I was like, maybe this is a good time to give it a shot.
Right. So, this is not, when we think of it, we're thinking, okay, you're getting on a bike and you just go. But there's a lot more to it. You didn't have a personal assistant, getting your lodging set up. And that even presented some unique situations for you, correct?
Yeah, no, it's a self-support. The Trans Am Bike Race is a self-supported bike race. Yeah. Which basically means from the time the gun goes off in Astoria, Oregon, until you cross the finish line in Yorktown, Virginia, you are totally on your own. There's no sag wagons, there's no support, within the rules, you're not supposed to be calling family or loved ones to make reservations, or obviously you call, but not for those purposes. You don't have any managers trying to manage, what you're doing. You have all your gear, you have to make your own reservations, figure out what you're eating, all entirely on your own. So it does present some unique challenges, some unique stressors, but looking back at it, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. And you learn a lot about yourself as you go through that process. But it's a challenge to get from Oregon to Virginia on your own.
The post office you had to stay the night in, was that the most interesting place you stayed the night in on the trip?
As far as post offices go, it was pretty nice. It was carpeted, it was heated, it was dry. So now I didn't get great sleep. I slept with one eye open. It was kind of weird. People started coming in, ranchers, farmers at 5 in the morning to get their mail, and who's this guy sleeping in the post office? Come to find out, a few nights later, one of the guys who was racing behind us did the same thing, and the local sheriff kicked him out. Really? So I was fortunate, because the sheriff's office was actually like the next building over. So I just happened to get lucky.
It had to be just amazing to see the United States from coast to coast, seeing how the topography changes and just how beautiful this country is.
It's an extremely gorgeous country, and you don't realize it sometimes until you get out. And seeing things from a bicycle, seat is very different than a car or an airplane window. It's a big country. It's a gorgeous country. And one of the observations I made is when you're state to state, very subtle changes. But then when you take a step back and you look at, well, Missouri versus Montana, very, very different people, very different, cultures. And it was kind of fun to see that transition all the way across the country.
So you get to the finish line. You get to the finish line and you see your father there. And I mean, that had to be an amazing feeling, not only to see him there, but to think that, wow, he must be an amazing cyclist because he got there before you.
Well, yeah, he flew. He flew. But no, people have asked me, oh, what was that like? Because it was Lisa, my wife, kind of did this without me knowing. It's kind of a surprise, which it was a good surprise. The finish line of this, the route you have to go through Yorktown, Virginia, you go along the coast and you have to go back up this hill, which is like total torture at the end of 4,200 miles. You just want to be done with any type of climbing. Well, you climb up this hill and there's the monument, and it was like 95 degrees. I'd already been up at that point for 27 hours. Mike and I had made a push from Lexington, Virginia all the way through. So we'd ridden, by the time I turned my bike computer off, I'd ridden for 19 hours and 40 minutes in that 27-hour period, and there was no sleep in there. And so I was a little bit out of it, to say the least, when I got there. And there was my dad, Lisa was there, one of my best friends from high school and her family was there. There were some folks who are fans of the race who live in that area, so they all came out. So there's, I don't know, 20 people there, 15, 20 people there. And I'm like, been up for 27 hours, I'm tired, I'm kind of disoriented a little bit. And I look up and there's my dad. And I was just like, I was shocked, pleasantly surprised, but I was like, oh, hi, how are you? It was probably on his side, maybe a little anticlimactic of my reaction, but I was just so out of it that now again, looking back at it, I was like, yeah, that was pretty neat. And I'm glad my wife had that surprise for me.
So just give us the lesson learned overall here from this race.
I think the biggest thing, I think there's two real big things. One, personally, when you set out to do something, and I would like to believe COVID also taught us this in 2020, that you have to be willing to adapt. Like, you don't know what's going to happen the next day. But when you go out and do something like this, you really don't know what's going to happen the next day. And you have to be willing to just accept it and adapt to whatever your circumstances might be. Being flexible and being willing to adapt, I think, is a life lesson that I'll take with me. And then I think, again, generally, like, how nice people are and they're willing to help. And so I think, that's something that I'll take with me, is you just kind of have to open yourself up to others and let other people in. People are pretty nice.